Hi everyone. I hope you don't mind Hastings snoring. He's sleeping beside me and I literally he's too cute to move and wake up. I'm so sorry. If you can hear this. Hold on, let me put you next to him so you can hear it. There you go. So you may hear it in the background. I apologize in advance. I'm doing a quick video. Well, I always say quick. Now, there should be like a disclaimer. It usually isn't ever quick. And I keep saying it because I don't use my brain thinking about it. And then I hear myself and I'm like, oh, yeah, it's not going to be quick. I've done a post on the WEF and the foundations of the creation of WEF and the creation and push for climate change and who's been behind it, which has been the former Prince Philip and I think it's Prince Bernhard of Netherlands and Canada's Maurice Strong and people like that under the Nature Trust 1001. Now, it's because I was inspired by an absolute moron shell who's a politician supposedly, Malcolm Roberts in Queensland, Australia. I sent him the report and all my research on the monarchy infiltrating our government, and of course, each and every political party and politician ignored my email, but he also ignored it. So don't ever think that we're independent and that we're free and liberated. We are not. We are completely owned and controlled by the monarchy itself under the Crown, and we have always been a colony, as much as New Zealand is, and as much as we all are. Now, he wanted to go on and on. I've just found this because I was doing actually some more research. I'm going to do a video after this with a compilation of all of the pushes by the Queen, by the now King, by Prince William, by Prince Harry, by Princess Catherine, of all the globalist measures of vaccines, of climate change, of genetically modified foods, etc., etc. And that's not even considering the damehoods and knighthoods that they have provided to protect the very people that orchestrated these horrendous, inhumane campaigns and continue to do so. But I think in response to this particular post by Malcolm Roberts, that in February this year, February the 1st, he decided to blame Maurice Strong to say that he created climate fraud and he created climate change because you wouldn't know this, but Malcolm Roberts in Australia is controlled opposition, political controlled opposition. He's meant to be all about Australia first. He's meant to be anti-vaccine. He's meant to be anti-climate change, and all to protect the sovereign nation of Australia. That's complete and utter bullshit. He was with that. I'm sure he was involved in that consortium or that conference with Jordan Peterson and all those other fucksticks that are all controlled up, brands in London. Do you remember that? Is it the ARF conference, or do you remember that event? It was funded by the guy who owns GB News, who's also just another plan. Everything's controlled. Don't ever think that that anyone is fighting for your justice. They're not. There are independents out there that are completely censored, and those are the people that you should be looking at. The people that quietly do research and find out things for themselves and for you. And he wanted to blame Canada's Maurice Strong, on the climate fraud, which inspired me to do a whole post, to tell Malcolm Roberts to go fuck himself, and also for all of these controlled ops to go fuck themselves. I am so and utterly sick and angry over this bullshit that is the new narrative, the re-narration of our history, of what's important. So I'm going to explain to you what exactly happened and what has taken place. Now, bear with me. The first thing I want you to do is look up the 1001 Nature Trust. It was founded by Prince Philip and Prince Bernhard, mostly, and it invited all of these elitists and aristocracy, and it included Maurice Strong, to pledge to basically have pay for a $10,000 membership, and it was to shift the paradigm of let me just get this here so I say it word for word. It was to shift the paradigm of saving humanity from the empire towards the new green paradigm of saving nature from humanity. It was the introduction of climate change, and there being an environmental crisis. This environmental crisis was created by UN and all of Chatham House's little branches and constructs, and especially there was another WEF and WHO branch called the World Meteorological Organization. Was that what it was called? WMO? I'm sure it was, and it had the same logo. You'll see it in a minute. And in 1972, they created the climate change crisis. I mean, Einstein and Pilgrim Society, what's his name? Bernard. I had just spoken about him. Oh, God, his name's Bernard. I forgot him. I'll get there. But Bernard, that guy, that philosopher, they were the first ones. He was really the first one to initiate through Fabianism, one world governance, also through an environmental crisis, and which is really just another way of saying depopulation. And the whole net zero and the CO2 came later on. That wasn't initially in 1972. That wasn't really all of these symptoms of an environmental crisis. They didn't really have those symptoms down pat just yet, but they had a crisis going. And that was created through a report from this WMO in 1972. By 1974, the UN conference came with a UN pact led by the British or Queen's agent, Henry Kissinger, who basically stated for all the UN countries to sign on the dotted line that we will move towards this new paradigm, this new green paradigm, also the shift towards China as being the head economy, and basically the economic restructure through the fake climate sham and scam that it is today, what we see. I've probably said a lot of what I'm about to say, but I just want to get that out there first to give you a brief summary. Okay. Now, you will discover the monarchy is behind the founders and patrons of the WEF by looking into the 1001 Nature Trust. One of Prince Bernhard and Prince Philip's most powerful ally was a Canadian named by the name of Maurice Strong, a 1001 Trust founding member who also happened to co-found the World Economic Forum and served as WWF vice president under Philip from 1976 to 1978. So WWF was kind of working next to or beside the Nature Trust 1001. In a 1990 interview with West Magazine, Strong let the cat out of the bag, asking rhetorically, what if a small group of world leaders were to conclude that the principal risk to the earth comes from the actions of the rich countries? So only the rich countries, right? So not like the developing nations, not BRICS that have outsourced all of the industries and the industrial complexes with all the CO2 emissions. Like, think of all that pollution that's now in BRICS, like China and India, especially with the use of coal, because remember, coal is a really big problem. And India's whole livelihoods can be determined by the use of coal. Anyway, I won't get into that. But they're the ones that all of our industries have been outsourced to BRICS. But it is now still the rich countries, can you believe it? The G7 economies and countries that are being blamed, where we have to not eat meat so they can buy all of our farmlands. They can buy more of our lands and own all of our resources, and have this economic transition completed under the guise of environmentalism, right? It's all our fault, despite completely outsourcing all of our industries. Well, most of our industries, it's still our problem, despite BRICS literally polluting their entire air from all of the mining and all of the outsourced industries now in those countries. Don't you find that fascinating? Yeah. Okay. So he, who also happened to co-found the World Economic Forum and served as the Sorry, I've just lost my way. And if the world is to survive, those rich countries would have to sign an agreement. So this isn't in a 1990 interview. So there was already an agreement in place by 1974, through the UN, of course, which was just it has always been just a means, just another mechanism to be able to, on a globally collective means, be able to get every country together to push this agenda. To sign an agreement reducing the impact of the environment on the environment, will they do it? So I wonder if this was the agreement in 1974 to push the outsourcing of all of our industries and all of our GDP towards these BRICS countries, which was also China. If you remember my BRICS video, China was created purely based on the same British aristocracy and monarchy, their investments into China through the City of London. So the whole economy of China is already owned and founded based on this aristocracy and these families. So, yeah, it's all about getting rich. But we're to blame. We're to blame for being so developed and so wealthy, despite them creating that in the first place. Would have to sign reducing the impact of their environment. Will they do it? The group's conclusion is no. The rich countries won't do it, which they already did. They won't transform. So in order to save the planet, the group decides, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Which is what they agreed to anyway. And that was the whole point, right? For our industrialized civilizations to collapse and be outsourced to BRICS, which is primarily founded on the investments of the same group that are pushing this agenda and this economic reform and complete restructure of our world. So in order to save the planet, yep. It is important to recall that Maurice Strong's remarks occurred in the context of a fictional book, wink, he wished to write that would take place at the World Economic Forum, much like Netanyahu's book about 9/11 years before, right? A group he and Kissinger led in co-founding 20 years earlier using a German cardboard cutout named Klaus Schwab. In 2015, Klaus eulogized Maurice Strong, by calling him my mentor. While some apologists dismiss the sociopath's remarks as simple musings over a work of fiction, it is worth considering what Maurice himself announced at the keynote address to the 1992 UN Conference on Population and the Environment in Rio de Janeiro. Strong had been tapped to head this second Earth Summit, the first having been the 1972 Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment, which he also chaired because he was the one who led climate change since the beginning of its creation in 1972. At this 1992 summit, Strong said, industrialized countries have developed and benefited from the unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. Unsustainable. Why? We don't know. Which have produced our present dilemma. Created dilemma, shall we say. It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, it's always the affluent middle class that need to be completely erased, involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and workplace air conditioning. Shame on you. And suburban housing are not suburban housing. That's the point of that sentence. Are not sustainable. A shift is necessary toward lifestyles less geared to environmentally damaging consumption patterns. For us plebs only, right? The Rio Summit had established a new era in the consolidation of NGOs and corporations, under the Green Agenda. This doctrine was formalized with Agenda 21, later renamed Agenda 2030, when they couldn't get to 2021, and the Earth Charter, co-authored by Mikhail Gorbachev, Jim McNeill, and Maurice Strong between 1996 to 2000. The International Earth Charter Drafting Committee was chaired by none other than transhumanist billionaire Stephen Rockefeller. Fancy that. According to the World Economic Forum's own website, Prince Bernhard was the primary patron of the infamous 1973 WEF summit that announced the Davos Manifesto for the first time. So in between the creation of climate change in 1972 and the UN Pact of all nations, of all rich nations, to move to collapse their industrialized civilizations for the greater good of a fake catastrophe. The WEF had their 1973 summit that announced the Davos Manifesto for the first time, laying the groundwork for the theory of technocratic feudalism with a loose capitalist veneer known as a stakeholder capitalism, which, as you know, capitalism has just been a means because capitalism is not what they're wishing for and hoping for at this point. It was also at this 1973 summit that the Club of Rome was first introduced to the world scene in order to present a new program for population control. Oh no, what have I done? Apologies, let me go back. Maurice Strong was founded the UN's panel on climate change. In a BBC interview, of course BBC, in 1972, he said nothing about CO2 emissions, but a lot about overpopulation and the limits to economic growth. His solution, perpetual austerity. In the first UN Council discussing human environmental issues that came out in 1972 via a controlled World Meteorological Organization, just like WEF, the WHO, and UN report, it stipulated an environmental crisis. 1001 Clubs, Maurice Strong, first laid out their caring capacity and depopulation as a way to save the world that placed the blame on us, both the perpetrator and the victim. I will show you that video in a moment, that interview. 2 years later, in 1974, Kissinger led the UN pact of all countries signing on the dotted line towards a new global economic restructure via a fake environmental catastrophe, including Australia's Gough Whitlam, who then by, I think was it 1975, was removed by the monarchy through our Governor-General. And Philip's son, the new King Charles, has advocated it since the 80s, because in the compilation that you will see in a new video that you will see after this video that I will publish, you will see that King Charles himself has stated that he has been working on this for 40 years and advocating towards climate change for 40 years, even before 2014, when there was a crisis that emerged of an environmental issue. Before that, there were conspiracies and things like that of that nature, but it was never an issue. Was it ever an issue to you before 2014? No, it wasn't. Even in the 90s, telling us we only had 10 years to comply. Now, 20 years on from those 10 years, but 30 years on from that, from him trying to force climate change at that point as a sense of urgency, he is closer than ever. Now, Philip's grandsons are carrying the torch, in particular the heir with his pointless, infamous earthshot. Know your history and think. The monarchy is far more powerful than you have ever dreamed of. Now, I'm going to show you... This is the annual report of the World Meteorological Organization, 1972. IMO, WMO, centenary. 1873 to 1973. I can't zoom in, but you catch my drift. All right, this is a part of the report. Oh, for goodness sake. You will see the countries there. All right. From Stockholm to Rio, A Journey Down a Generation, 1992, Maurice Strong wrote, "The concept of national sovereignty has been an immutable, indeed sacred principle of international relations. It is a principle which will yield, only slowly and reluctantly, to the new imperatives of global environmental cooperation." One world governance, right? Sacrificing national sovereignty under the global environmental cooperation. So this is towards the whole entire economic and political restructure of our world. Is the climate change agenda. What is needed is recognition of the reality that in so many fields, and this is particularly true of environmental issues, it is simply not feasible for sovereignty to be exercised unilaterally by individual nation states, however powerful. I guess in the following videos, video compilation that you will see, that's probably why King Charles is now advocating towards a military-style forced move towards climate change and net zero, whatever have you. And this is particularly true of environmental issues. It is simply not feasible. Yep. However powerful, the global community must be assured of environmental security. Why? The global community must be assured of environmental security. And here, November I think it was 1998. I can't see because this stupid 5 out of 5. Pensacola News Journal, Pensacola, Florida, 9th of November, 1990. I think it's 1998. Prince Charles speaks about global warming. In Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, Prince Charles urged Saudi and British oil merchants Monday to address the threat of global warming at once. This is an issue which we have to address now, not in 10 or 20 years' time, which is now 30 years' time, he said in a speech in Saudi Arabia's oil-producing eastern province. You can see how well that went. I guess Agenda 2021 didn't work out so well, or Agenda 1998 or 2008, or he's been going at it for 40 hard years.
With all the evidence that we've amassed in our preparations for the Stockholm Conference, including the views of many of the world's leading scientists, I am convinced that the prophets of doom have got to be taken seriously. In other words, doomsday is a possibility. I'm equally convinced that doomsday is not inevitable. Why do you think they have to be taken seriously? Well, they have to be taken seriously because it has become apparent that today man's own activities have reached the scale where they are the principal determinants of his own future. For example, we are now, today, effecting more changes in the composition of the atmosphere, in the composition of the waters of the world, and even the composition of certain elements in our food chain. We're making more of these changes in one generation that have been made in millions of years of human evolution. We don't know exactly what will be the ultimate impact of these changes, but we do know that many of them are irreversible, and many of them could be decisive in their effects on man's future. This question is not a matter of one man or one group of people's predictions. It's a matter of the fact that an increasing number of very serious-minded scientists have produced evidence from a whole series of events, many of them the well-known pollution or environmental problems that have come to our attention, that the natural world in which man lives and on which he depends is indeed deteriorating, is being destroyed in many instances at a rate that is accelerating and that can only continue to accelerate unless we begin to control the activities that are having this destructive impact. Now, whether we are pessimistic or optimistic depends really on what we think about the nature of man. Whether we really believe that man, in light of this evidence, is going to be wise enough and enlightened enough to subject himself to this kind of discipline and control. The film Zero Population Growth predicts a society in the next century where there is overpopulation, where there is extreme pollution, and where people can no longer be allowed to have...
Just wanted to pause there because and it didn't work so well. But I wanted to pause there, and I'll go back to the start of this question that the interviewer led, which is amazing to believe that back then they were talking about somehow the environment, having the environmental crisis that was created had a correlation with infertility, which is now across all of our media, which also has something which people are blaming vaccines for, but which personally I blame the inflation for. It has nothing to do with the environment. nothing to do with it. But this is a part of depopulation, and this is a means. Back then, this was a means to excuse infertility in our day and age under environmental duress. So it's very interesting to see this in all these key words now that we're living it. We're actually living it in this one video.
The film Zero Population Growth predicts a society in the next century where there is overpopulation, where there is extreme pollution, and where people can no longer be allowed to have babies. Now, is this the shape of things to come? Well, I haven't seen the film, but I can say that if we continue on our present trends, on our present course, it's very likely that in many parts of the world this will be the case. In fact, we have begun to see it in many areas. Now, licenses to have babies, something that I got in trouble for some years ago.
Also, of course, feminism and encouraging the woman to work as much as the man, breaking up the family structure, family values, has also contributed to less fertility rates, which is evident. So also bear that in mind. He was talking about a film, but it was still the fact that the interviewer was bringing this up as part of the environmental issue. And pollution, well, we should be having far, far less if we've outsourced all of our industries, and if our industrial civilizations have collapsed in G7 economies, don't you think? We should be having far less. So then what the fuck are they talking about?
For suggesting, even in Canada, that this might be necessary at some point, or at least some restriction on the right to have a child. I'm not proposing this. I was simply predicting this as one of the possible courses that society would have to seriously consider should we get ourselves into this kind of situation. But I think is the promising thing in this is that it isn't necessary to get ourselves into this situation. How do we avoid it? We can avoid it, I think, first of all, by doing what we're now doing, and that is discussing it, understanding that the problem does exist, that the possibility does exist, and in the actions which I believe still are open to us, if we take those actions in time. I'm persuaded that the future of man is going to be decided very much by the decisions taken in this generation. And we have to realize it took mankind something like 50 millennia to achieve its first billion of population on this earth. And now it takes us some 20 years to add 1 billion people. Now, this has got to be regarded as a serious problem. Dr. Strong, there is a cynical view that any United Nations conference must be a talking shop at which a lot is said and very little is done. How do you answer that? Well, I can only say that I understand that cynicism. It was one of the things that I had to consider when I took on this responsibility. But it is true. It's rhetoric and very little follow-up. And right from the beginning, however, we have been determined, because of the fact that action in this field is absolutely indispensable to man's future, that governments at Stockholm would be given the maximum opportunity to take decisions which will lead to action.
Sorry, I'm just processing something he's just said. Give me a second. I have to go back. I apologize.
Now, this has got to be regarded as a serious problem. Dr. Strong, there is a cynical view that any United Nations conference must be a talking shop.
Okay, so he's talking about United Nations, and then he talks about the years of the time of his responsibility with United Nations. I just want to make that clear.
Which a lot is said and very little is done. How do you answer that? Well, I can only say that I understand that cynicism. It was one of the things that I had to consider when I took on this responsibility. But it is true. rhetoric and very little follow-up. And right from the beginning, however, we have been determined, because of the fact that action in this field is absolutely indispensable to man's future, that governments at Stockholm would be given the maximum opportunity to take decisions which will lead to action. Now, equally, however, I believe that the nations of the world themselves are impressed with the evidence that we have amassed that suggests that we must adopt a much more cooperative attitude towards our dealing with this problem, that Stockholm must usher in a new era of international cooperation. And I believe that this will be the dominant motivation. I have to hope that. Governments have had a long time to prepare themselves. They've been deeply involved in the preparations. They have before them a series of concrete proposals, which they have had now in their hands for about 3 months. Certainly ample time to consider them. There is no basis for avoiding these decisions at Stockholm, and I believe with that the governments will go to Stockholm with an overriding sense of the importance of achieving consensus on at least a large percentage of these proposals.
So he's just explained that they have put through proposals by 1972 while creating fake evidence through fake reports of climate change and the climate change hoax and scam, that all governments must sign and comply, for which by 1974 we did. And hence the current state of all G7 economies, including America, Australia, Canada, UK, New Zealand, all of our inflation through central banking policy, which is Bank of England, City of London, and also Bank of International Settlements. And then you have the UN Pact that was signed in 1974 through the creation by 1972 of climate change to push for one world governance through a global environmental crisis. They needed a crisis that was universal, that was global, for us to all come together in order to restructure our global economy. Thank you very much.
There is a 75% chance that the entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years.
You have sea ice, which is melting at a rate that the Arctic Ocean now increasingly is exposed. In 5 years, scientists predict we will have the first ice-free Arctic.
I quite frankly think it's not only outrageous, it's really stupid. Everyone who willfully denies the impacts of climate change is condemning the American people to a dangerous future, and either is really, really dumb or has some other motive of that. How can you deny there's climate change, for God's sake?